Germany has officially entered recession. What does this mean for Europe? What does it mean for the rest of the world?
Everybody who was willing to see what was unfolding in Germany or in Europe generally was expecting this. It's a little bit of an ironic game, I would say, that is currently played, and we see this in the case of other countries as well. First, there's slight growth, then there is no growth, and then there was negative growth, or in this case now in Germany, it's a recession. If we look at manufacturing data in detail, particularly in the energy-intensive industries, this is an energy-induced recession, something we talked about a year ago, I think, that this is how it's going to play out. And everybody who believes in reality, I have to say, must have seen it coming. Like, you cannot be an industrial producing nation if you don't have energy. Everything needs to be made at some point, and everything that needs to be made or gets made needs energy. It is that simple. And we're struggling against reality, and now it sets in. There is one group of people, of which I think we're going to talk in a second, who definitely want this to happen. Then, which I think is the bigger group, I think the political class doesn't know. They have no clue how industry works. They have no clue how commodity markets work. I mean, we saw this with the sanctions against Russia. Russia, that was supposedly going to break down under this sanction, is still doing fairly well under these conditions, because they know how the commodity markets work, whereas Western politicians don't. And the same is true for industry in general, right? They don't know how stuff is made. They don't know where things come from. And this is a very, very worrisome trend. So we have radicals on one side. We have, as I say, incompetent groups on the other side, but together they are a formidable force that is very hard to overcome. In renewables, as I'm sure some of your listeners and viewers know, the supply chain when it comes to wind, solar, and batteries is 87% under the control of China. So, I mean, good for the Chinese, but that's really bad for us. So we thought that dependence on Russian gas is a problem. Well, you wait for the dependence on Chinese photovoltaic and Chinese wind turbines. It's just going to be equally worse. So this is a sense of, I cannot call it any differently, it's a sense of economic suicide. And it's driven by, one has to speak openly about this. There is an agenda behind this, as I said before, some who want it, some who are kind of caught up in it, and of course also a media that is entirely silent.
Well, the United States is in many ways cheering this on, right? The decline of Europe means the rise of the US dollar. So the United States is going to sort of sit back and let Europe shoot itself in the foot. And it seems like they are shooting themselves in the foot. Right now, they're holding the Beyond Growth Conference. And I want to get your take on this. This is unbelievable what they're planning in Europe, which is the idea of degrowth. So they're literally holding a conference right now on how do we not grow. I mean, it's absolute insanity. I just want to play for you one of the speakers that they brought in to speak at this conference and get your take on this. Let's listen.
Infinite growth on finite resources is not only a myth, but it's extractivist and ruthlessly oppressive by design. So when talking about growth and defending growth, there is a very important first question that we need to ask ourselves. Who are we growing this economy for? And what stories do we use to justify it? We have to acknowledge what lays below our growth. White supremacy, colonialism, and imperialism. White supremacy justifies a global system of exploitation and extractivism. Colonialism lays at the foundations of the European economy, institutions, corporate value chains, trade deals, investment agreements, and geopolitical structures of wealth accumulation, which means that there is no degrowth without decolonization. We need to take these conversations outside of these rooms and make sure that for all of the hundreds of fossil fuel lobbyists demanding growth, there are thousands of us demanding degrowth. We need to redistribute wealth, cancel climate debt, implement a universal basic income, massively invest in loss and damage funds, degrow the economy in high-income countries, increase universal public services, reduce working time, dematerialize, and reprioritize what it means to live a human life.
A growth economy means it's white supremacy, and there's so many people in the audience that are shaking their heads right along with this. This is Europe right now.
Well, I think it's as bad in the United States, right? You cannot have a debate about anything, and at some point it's going to be white supremacy, colonialism, any of these buzzwords that are used by these pseudo-intellectuals. And that's what they are. Like the degrowth movement is a quasi-religious pseudo-intellectual movement. They have no footing in reality. This Beyond Growth conference was organized by the European Parliament. Everybody who's a member of the European Parliament makes around 100,000 euros a year. Ursula von der Leyen, who opened the event, makes almost 400,000 euros a year, and that does not include all the benefits that they get. So this is a very, very wealthy, very rich class that revels in the idea to tell others that they have to adapt to lower living standards. And of course, they themselves, because they are so virtuous, are exempt from it. This is an ideological agenda that comes under the guise of science, but it is pseudoscience, nothing else. That European taxpayers have to finance this and are kind of paying for the mud through which they are going to be dragged is, to be quite honest, is in many ways cruel. And this is an open debate that one has to have, because if the point that the idea of the European Union or of the European states is to create conditions where life for their people is becoming more miserable and less prosperous. I mean, all of them are basically in violation of their oath of office. Now you have in Germany, they're planning a law for energy efficiency that the government can basically see how much electricity you're using on a regular basis or on a minute basis. I mean, this is surveillance. I mean, this is what we're moving towards. You never hear poor people getting into the streets and saying, tax us more, take away more from us, make our bills higher. It's always those who can afford it that say it has to get more expensive. We have to be very, very careful here.
Yeah, you're right. The poor, the middle class will absolutely be crushed the most. We've seen that absolutely already with these Russian sanctions. We see what's happening in Colombia. We see what's happened in Sri Lanka. These countries get hit hardest first, and then it trickles up from there.